Before he spoke creation, the God of heaven knew our names. Formed in his reflection, we are his glory on display. And his heart is good, he is always kind. With the cross he proved he is on our side. We are the sons, we are the daughters of God. No matter where we go, we're close to the Father's heart. And though we stumble, he will not let us fall. We are the Lord's, and he will never forsake his own. We are the sons, we are the daughters of God. His love he lavished on us and called us children of the King. And in his loving kindness, he chose the lowly and the weak. And his heart is good, he is always kind. With the cross he proved he is on our side. We are the sons, we are the daughters of God. No matter where we go, we're close to the Father's heart. And though we stumble, he will not let us fall. We are the Lord's, and he will never forsake his own. We are the sons, we are the daughters of God. And when the lies speak louder than the truth, remind me I belong to you. And when I can't see past the dark of night, sons, we are the daughters of God. No matter where we go, we're close to the Father's heart. And though we stumble, He will not let us fall. We are the Lord's, and He will never forsake His own. We are the sons, we are the daughters of God.
Good morning. Good morning. This is the day, better than Christmas, the day we have waited for year long, and it's finally here. I can't believe it. We have a calendar and we exit off until we get to this day, because today is, as many of you know, Joy McGuire's birthday. Happy birthday, Joy. That is so great. Your husband, Rob, actually paid me to say that. And just want you to know, if you would like to give a shout out to anyone, if it's within the bounds of morality, I will for a small fee. It's just a way to earn a little extra on the side. But happy birthday, Joy. And happy Father's Day to all you guys out there. I know that this is a day that can be a day of mixed emotions for us as a church family, and for those of you who are guests today, because for some, you had really, really good dads, and we get really sentimental about that. And some of you had really bad word dads. You didn't have such a good dad, and it's painful. And for some of you, Dad wasn't there for whatever reason. And this day reminds you that it's difficult. And then when you get to be an old guy like me, you don't just reflect on your dad and think about him. There are ways that my dad was a good dad. He provided as best he could. But, I never had his presence in my life. We're going to talk about that in a moment, like my heart yearned for. And some of you could say that. Many of you men, I've heard you, many of you men feel the same way. But you began to shift, and you began to think about who we are, who I am as a dad. And the moments you regret and the things you wish you could change, or you could go back and think, did I really say that? And moments where you felt like I was brilliant, I did that so well. And we're somewhere in the middle. And many of us are still in that process of dadding, of being dads. I struggled this week with this, a little bit about this, and because I don't preach around the holidays. I added that up a few years ago, and if you do like Christmas messages and Mother's Day, and you do Easter, and then you do Labor Day, all those, and you look at the calendar and you think, well, there's like 4 days left to preach on something else besides whatever that holiday is about. So I kind of began to move away from that, because a lot of that's an American invention or whatever. It's not biblical or scriptural. But today God moved my heart into this to talk about, and to you dads, to challenge you to rise up, and for us, for you and me, to be the best generation of dads that we could ever be, and to make a difference in this generation, So men, let's rise up. Let's rise up. Let's don't be mediocre. Let's don't settle for less. Good enough's not good enough. So in thinking about that, and I had a challenge, I was talking to J.O., who's got a birthday coming up in just a few weeks, and I don't know if you're like the oldest guy in the room or not, but if you probably are. You're pretty close if you're not there. And the contrast that I preached a funeral yesterday for a young lady who's just 33 years old. J.O. said, I'm here, and she's not. You know, we don't know. You do not know how long you're going to have your dad or how long you're going to be here, dads, for your children. We don't know. And I'm not trying to be overly sentimental or what's the word, maudlin, is that the word? I'm not trying to wallow in that, but it made me think. It made me reflect on that we've only got X amount of time to do this and to do it well. So I'm thinking about that, and God gives me this idea, this concept for this message, and I get excited about it. But I couldn't come up with a way to, this is me. That's my little move, launching into this, how to get this started and kind of get your attention about that. So I came all the way up to yesterday, and for a pastor, that's cutting it close because you start getting a little anxious, like tomorrow's the day, it's the big show, it's time, and I don't know how to start the message except just to jump right in. And sometimes that's what you do, but the Lord gave me this out of the Wall Street Journal yesterday at breakfast, right here. Isn't that just like God? Because I'm looking at this article, and this is so crazy. You're going to think, Dan, this is going to change my life. The title is, Why Bird Dads Are Superior. I'm being beat out by a bird who is a better dad than me. And I want you to check this out because this was so fascinating. Now, I'm a little geeky, and some of you are like this, and I get interested in stuff like this, but this is this article about how in the bird world, the dads, the fathers, are the ones who actually do a big portion of the parenting. And this is so cool because it said one of the most impressive bit of bird fathering is the way that many male birds model behavior for their young, especially when it comes to bird song. It said these dads will stay in the nest, these father dads, what do you call them? Bird dads. This is falling apart. You think, this is illustration you're bragging about that was going to really pull us in? That they're so sophisticated in their species, they would get on the nest and just sing to these baby birds. This is true. This is in the Wall Street Journal. They will sing to their baby birds, and the baby birds will just listen to their father. And he will do that again and again and again. And then they will begin to peep, to go, the little bird sounds that they make. They will begin to do that. And then after a while, they will begin to imitate their dads. And that's how they learn how to sing. And an interesting phenomena, it says, because these very young songbirds have a period of vocalizing called subsong, just like human baby babble. And they have speech defects just like we do. They stutter, for instance. And like humans, there is a window of time that their brains are easily wired. And they depend on this. So the male will tutor them in the early days of song learning. And if he's not there, it affects them. Like a human dad happily reading to a child, a skilled male bird will model fine singing. The baby bird sits and it soaks up these sounds. And then after about 2 million times, it says he begins to sing a strikingly true version of his dad's song. Then after something like 2 million notes of trial and error, he arrives at a strikingly true version of his dad's song. This sparkling bird song, like human language, will help him to establish a home, find a partner, secure his place in the flock and family life, and when he himself is finally a father, he will faithfully pass it along to his own brood of young ones. The Bible has a lot of fathers that are portrayed, a lot of children, and those relationships and the dynamics, and even some of the greatest characters that we see. David, one of the most notable characters in all of Scripture, but in some ways he wasn't such a great dad. The Bible talks a lot, too, about shepherds. It talks about sheep, and you see those pictures from the Old Testament all the way back, all the way up to the New Testament. And then there's really two prevalent themes, I think, all throughout Scripture. And it begins even with God as a revelation of himself as a shepherd to his people. And all through the Old Testament, he's presented. Think about the 23rd Psalm. I mean, that's what that's about. And then you get to Jesus, who is called the Good Shepherd. He's the ultimate shepherd. And it goes on. And even pastors in the New Testament, that were called pastors, which is actually just an anglicized Latin word, translated means shepherd. That's what my role is, more so than a preacher or a counselor. All that encompasses those things, but it's a shepherd. And Dad, I want you to rise up, and I'm going to challenge you, because I believe this is how your role is defined in the New Testament and in your home. You are above and beyond everything else. You're a shepherd. We have a hard time coming to grips with this call to be a shepherding, because shepherding, at least for me, conjures up certain pictures. And you've seen that picture. You've seen this. Here's Jesus, the shepherd. Now, this reminds me of paintings that they would hang on those, that institutional green wall color that every church used, or the off-white, and then they would hang these pictures up in the Sunday school classrooms. Pictures like this are a little cheesy, but, and so here's Jesus, the Good Shepherd, and that's the image that we get. I just want you to look at that for a moment, particularly those of you of my generation. His hair is beautiful. It's just been shampooed and it's pulled back, and he's got that millennium cool trimmed beard. I mean, look at that. He's so in style. It looks like his hands have just been manicured recently. That's just so soft. And he's looking down at that little sheep, and just look at that. That's shepherding. That's the only problem about that. It's just beautiful. And if one of your relatives painted that, please don't be offended. That's the only problem is that's just not very biblically accurate. It looks like he's never gone through anything rough in his life. There's not a mark on him. He's just perfect. He's not even Middle Eastern. He's like a Southern white guy. Okay. He could have. That's a Tennessee. I don't know. It's warm. It's cuddly. It makes us feel good, but it's biblically completely incorrect. It's a precious moment. In ancient Near Eastern culture, they knew what a shepherd was. And it couldn't be turned into a precious moments figurine. Shepherds were tough. Shepherds looked more like this guy. They bore as their mark scars of defending their flock. They were warriors. They always carried a weapon, and that staff was stained with the blood of wild animals that they fought and battled. Their skin was rugged like leather. They didn't get invited to a lot of dinner parties because they didn't smell so good. They'd been with sheep all day and in the dust and in the heat. And they've slept out in the field. They're in the trenches. Their hands are dirty. There's no self-pity because it's a tough job. That's why they're there. And that's why God put us in the home as shepherds. And it's not always pretty and it's not easy. But God put you there, men, as shepherds. And when things get difficult with your children and when things are hard in the relationship, you don't say, well, I feel sorry for myself and this isn't fair. I don't want to go. I shouldn't go through. No, the thing you do is you look in the mirror and you say, that's why I'm here. I'm here to face down the enemies. I'm here to deal with the difficulties. I'm here to snatch my flock from danger. I'm here, and I will bear the marks of protection for those that God's given me, because that's my flock, and I will not abandon them. So those of you who will with me today, be ready to embrace and to bear the stench of being a shepherd, because as shepherds, we're all in. We're in. I know every dad here gets frustrated. We do things we wish we hadn't done. We say things we regret and later look back and think, the weight of my words carries so much. And being a father has never been easy. I think, and I don't want to exaggerate it, and I don't want to set us up, like we're doing something more special than anybody else, but I can say it's the hardest thing I've done and the most rewarding. And today, I think it's more difficult than ever to be a dad. We don't have good role models. I mean, we do to some degree. But you think about every television program or movie you've ever seen with dads in it. I mean, they aren't exactly the leader of the family type, unless you can go back as far as me and you remember Andy Griffith and Leave It to Beaver and those men. But on today's sitcoms, we're just the butt of every joke. Men are presented as incompetent and foolish and just bumbling along. We don't have much to go on when it comes to hearing and learning how to be a wise father. However, all through Scripture, and particularly in this one, in Ephesians 6, in less than 20 words, Paul gives men some really good advice on how to approach the task of fatherhood. He says this: fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. So if it comes down to this, fathers, you're a shepherd. Father is a shepherd. That's our job description. That's what we do. That's who we are. And today, what I'd like to do is to pull that together and just to look at three things in this one scripture, this one little verse, that fathers can do to develop a habit of being a servant leader to your family. My dad was a great guy. He was a Korean War veteran. He was a tough guy. He was raised in a rural part of West Tennessee. He worked hard his whole life, worked at a steel place. But there were times I think he wasn't aware of the other side of his role and how to shepherd and how to be a servant. He knew how to bark orders and he knew how to tell you what to do and how to discipline. He was really good at that. But guys, there's this process of learning how to serve and lead, and it comes together in you and in the role of being a shepherd. So first of all, be gentle. Notice this phrase, do not exasperate. Paul said this to fathers, but not to mothers. And that makes sense, right? Because who did you go to when you were hurt, or you had a secret, or you were wounded? Kathy gets 20 more times texts and calls from my children than I do. Nobody's ever had to say, Kathy, stop being so exasperating. But they had to tell us. He said, Dads, I got to tell you this, because for some reason, fathers have a natural giftedness in this area. And we have been subjected to this kind of leadership all throughout our lives. Coaches who bullied us. Bosses who think humiliation is a good motivational tool. And on I could go, the men in our lives. And so we have accidentally or purposely learned, and we've sometimes followed their example with our own kids. And as any kid can tell you, it can be frustrating and it can be exasperating. Don't say amen, because your dad might figure out it was you. You can just look at me and wink or nod. Okay, they're all winking and nodding. Okay, no, I'm kidding, dads. You're so sensitive. But you know what that word means when he says to be exasperating? And I have an ESV, and I like that, but I chose this other version because that just captures it. It means to provoke or to initiate. Literally, it means to make things worse. Dads, I won't ask you because, dads, have you ever had a situation with one of your children? Maybe it's behavior, maybe it's something, or maybe it's a teaching moment, but then you come in and what you did next actually made it worse instead of better? That's what this word means. Don't exasperate. Don't make it worse. That's what happens sometimes when we're ineffective. We just make the situation worse. And do you know what we do? Here's some of the ways we do that. I want you to raise your hand every time I get to the one of the things your dad does. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Relax. Chill. Okay. Perfectionism. When nothing is ever quite good enough. Inconsistency. When children never know which rules are going to be applied this time. Controlling behavior. When we try to run our children's lives, even into adulthood. Disapproval. When we fail to show mercy. That one hit home to me because I think sometimes I could have been more merciful. Unfairness. When we applied a double standard. I remember my dad saying, don't do as I do as I say do. And that confused me because what did I do as I grew up? I did what he did, not what he said. And inflexibility. It's my way or the highway. And I remember, because I was kind of a rebellious teenager, and I'm not putting this off on my dad like he was unfair because I exasperated him. There's so many times he'd point to the door and say, there's the door. That was a good imitation of my father. There's the door right there. Don't let it hit you on the rear end. And I would leave home. I would leave for several days or whatever. My mom would find out which friend I was staying with, and she'd call, and she'd be the peacemaker. And she'd talk to him, and then she'd talk to me, and she'd get us back, and I'd come home. And that scenario played out several times. Because he was inflexible and I was rebellious. These things make kids want to say, what's the use? No matter what I do, it's going to be wrong or it's never going to be good enough. Men, it makes your children just want to give up or look elsewhere for their approval because they'll get it from somewhere. That's why when Paul gave this same kind of advice to the Christians in Colossae, he said this in Colossians 3:21, fathers, do not exasperate, same word, your children, that they may not lose heart So they just don't lose heart. Our children don't find our unreasonable demands challenging. They find them draining, depleting, and defeating. Dads, you got to make an effort. You got to lighten up a little bit. And I know I'm a grandfather, and for me, the answer is always yes. And I wouldn't have preached this when I was 40, but now that I'm 45, and I do preach this. Ease up a little. Lighten up. It's okay. You don't always got to be the tough guy. You don't always got to be the bad guy. We want all of our kids to be successful, and we do have to nudge them. We got to push them, and you got to be there. But we want them to have character, and we want them to have integrity, and we want them to be persistent and dependable. But sometimes we try to develop those qualities in the wrong way, and we do that through our own flesh, and we push too hard, and we expect too much, and we bend too little, and then we exasperate our children. So, Father, just remember that sometimes it's okay. You gotta be the guy. And I understand that. You got to be firm. But in that, don't be hard. Because you will win their hearts with your tenderness, with your transparency. So try that with your kids. Be gentle. Even when you have to discipline them, be gentle in that. Now, secondly, not only be gentle, but be there. Be there. Notice that Paul uses this phrase, bring them up. There's only one way to do this effectively. Guys, you've got to invest the time in your children. That's what shepherds do. That's why shepherds smell like sheep, because they're with them all the time. I went out yesterday about 4 o'clock, and I ran in the heat, and you just melt. I mean, it's so humid out here, you know. I feel like I'm back in Memphis. It's just so humid. And I came in, I was just soaking wet, and there's everybody. And I wanted to engage in conversation. My son went as a counseling trip, and he's telling me what an awesome, awesome retreat you guys had. I want to hear more about it. Sounds like you had a really good time, so I was wanting to stay in the room. But I knew, this is a terrible illustration, that I smell bad. You know? I said, I got to go get a shower. Wait, don't tell another story. Everybody stop talking. Talk about something else until I get back, because I don't want to miss anything. I thought, I'm just going to stand over here. These shepherds would come into town after shepherding, and everybody go, oh, there's a shepherd. Somebody smells like a sheep in here. Guys, you got to be willing to get dirty. You got to be willing to invest the time and get scratched up and beat up and tired to do what you got to do to shepherd your family. You can't do it with clean hands, and you can't do it from a distance. It's messy business because you got messy kids. And that's what it takes. Our kids become our priority. It's not something we do in our spare time. It's not going to happen in your off hours. The U.S. Census Bureau reports that there are 70.1 million fathers in America. 24.7 of those are raising 3 or more children in their home under the age of 18. I think about 2.5 million of those are single dads. Children younger than 6 who live with married parents and eat breakfast with their father every day, 30%. Children younger than 6 who live with married parents and eat dinner with their father every day, about 60%. Children younger than 6 who live with married parents and are praised 3 or more times a day, about half. Dads, I know you're busy. I'm busy. I get it. We all are. But there's no amount of success in your business, in your professional life, that can take the place of the role that you play with your children. And I promise you, and I've been doing this over 3 decades, You will not regret whatever else you sacrificed for your kids. I want you to do your job. I want you to do it well. I want you to be successful. I want you to be noted in whatever field God has led you in. But don't let it be an excuse to not parent your kids. You got to take time to show up to play a game of catch, to attend dance recitals, to show up at the school function, and the worst of all, swim meets, where you sit for 6 hours to watch a 4-minute event. You got to do all of that, okay? I'm kidding, those of you who do swim. But, these things matter more than you realize. I ran track from 7th grade all the way through my senior year. This is very vulnerable. My dad was a good man, but he never came to one track meet. One time, our school hosted one of the meets, and our house was across the street. And there was the track, and there's a football field, and there's a hill, and then there's a little space, and then there was a big chain link fence. One time, in all those years, I looked up and I saw my dad standing on the other side of that fence. He didn't come in, he didn't sit on the bleachers, but I saw him. And I got so excited about that. And when my event came up, it's the 880 relay, and I looked up and he was gone. That happened many years ago, but I remember that. And some of you guys who are my age or older or even younger, you can tell the same kind of stories because you remember when your dad was there. These guys and those kids in kid stuff right now, more than anything else about you, you don't have to be talented and be able to do this better than other dads and rich and smart and all those things. You know what you got to do? Just suit up and show up. Just be there. Just be there. According to a recent report in USA Today, children involved with their fathers are more confident and less anxious in unfamiliar settings, better able to deal with frustrations, better able to gain a sense of independence, more likely to become compassionate adults, more likely to have a higher self-esteem, more likely to have a higher grade point average. They're more sociable, and about 10 times odds or chances they're going to stay out of jail. Be there for your kids, build their confidence, build their esteem. When a boy especially, and I think a daughter just said, when a boy knows that he's important to his dad, he knows he's important, period. When a girl knows that she is treasured, that she's cherished, she knows she is a treasure. Paul says, bring them up. And this means spending time with them. That's all you got to do. Just be in the room. There's one other way. This third way, he says, to develop the habit of servant leadership. Be an example. Paul says, bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. That means they need to hear in your words and see in your actions what it means to be a follower of Jesus. They need to hear in your words and see what it means to be a man of integrity, a hard worker, a good husband, a person of honor and respect. Someone very graciously recently gave me a Ticketmaster, gift card, and I thought that was really cool. And it's enough to cover a concert. And I thought, who do I go see? And it's hard. I'm looking at who all's coming to the Tennessee Theater and who's coming around. And I was thinking, who would I get to see? And, I think about all these bands that they're not alive anymore or they're in homes or something. I think, well, I can't go see. And, and one of the people that came to my mind was Garth Brooks. I'm not a big country guy, but wouldn't that be, he's back out there, right? And I don't know if he can swing out on the stage without hurting his back anymore. But, I thought that would be cool because he just puts on such a great show. And I heard him in an interview say this, and it made me like him even more. He said, many parents try to be a friend to their children. And that's what I see some of you doing. Just calling it out. My children have got enough friends. They need me to be a dad and to show them right from wrong. In his book, Lessons from a Father to a Son, John Ashcroft talks about Michael Jordan. He was probably, and I know some of you young guys are going to argue, best player of the game of basketball to ever live. But do you know that up until 1997, he never received the highest pay? He was never, in his career, the highest paid player. You think, well, that's crazy. You know why? Because he would negotiate these long, like 6-year contracts, and he would lock in at a figure, and it would go forward. Now, today, what a lot of guys do is they'll renegotiate. After a year or so, they'll go, I'm worth a lot more than that. We're going to renegotiate, or I'm not going to play. I'm going to break the contract. And there's all these disputes. Do you know that he never did that once? He said, because I gave my word and I promised, and this is what I said I would do it for, and I'm going to stick to it. He said, if I break that promise, how will my children ever know? He said, people said I was underpaid when I signed on the dotted line, but I gave my word. You stand by your word even when that might eventually go against you. Do you remember the Beatles? Some of you do. Of course, everybody does. When John Lennon spoke out against the war, and I was like a budding young hippie at the time, and he said, well, all you need is love and give peace a chance, and that resonated with a whole generation. We still kind of think that, but listen to what his son Julian said about him in Servant Magazine a few years ago, just a few years ago. He said, well, I felt like he was a hypocrite. Dad could talk about peace and love out loud to the world, but he could never show it to the people who supposedly meant the most to him, his wife and his son. How can you talk about peace and love and have a family that's in bits and pieces? Men, who else is going to teach them persistence and compassion and determination and mercy and courage and sincerity? It needs to be you. They need to hear it in your words and see it in your actions. You're a teacher by example. Bring your children up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. Men, think about it. How do we know how to fish? How do we know how to throw a ball and ride a bike? How to hunt? How to do all of those things that boys learn how to do? Because some man somewhere showed us how to do those things and modeled that. Could have been a grandfather, an uncle, a coach. More often than not, it was your dad. Let's rise up. Let's be the generation of shepherd dads that these kids need. Some of you are like me, your kids are all grown up. And if you've still got kids at home and you think, well, when they're 18, I'm done, I'm going to remind you one day that you thought that. I thought that too. In the 2004 Summer Olympic Games in Athens, Greece, the American women's 4x100 relay race was favored to win the gold medal. We knew we had it. This wasn't that long ago. The team featured Marion Jones, a sprinter who had won 4 gold medals already at the previous games in Sydney. The American team was off to a strong start in that race when Jones took the baton for the second leg of that race. She gained ground. She ran 100 meters, and she approached Lauren Williams, who was a young speedster who had that third leg. Williams began running as Jones drew near, and she reached back to receive the baton, but they couldn't make the handoff. Once, twice, 3 times, Jones thrust that baton forward, but each time she missed Williams' hand. And she just couldn't wrap her fingers around it, and finally, on the 4th try, they finally made the connection, but at that time they had crossed this, there's a 20-yard exchange zone, and they were out of that, and so they were disqualified. Everybody out there knew they had the fastest team on the track. The night before, they had the fastest qualifying time of any team, any country. But when they couldn't make that handoff, they were disqualified, the race was over. As important as it is for the previous generation to set the pace by living authentically, at some point, men, we're going to hand it off to the next generation. That handoff's got to happen. That baton of faith is going to be given to these guys and to these guys, and they're going to run a race into the future that we won't get to. Dads, I think that is especially true in these waves, these seasons, in the first 6 years, the first 12 years, the first 18 years. You got to make that handoff. And the way that you do that is the same way an Olympic athlete trains. Every time you teach them, every time you live with them, every time you are there for them, as a shepherd, you're practicing that handoff. And you do it again and again and again. And one day you do it for real. Your children need you. They're depending on you to equip them with all the tools and the resources to get them through life. Because you won't always be there to rescue them. And we do that by being gentle, not exasperating them. By being there, just spending time with them. And by teaching them with your words and by your example how much you love them and the way to go. Because you're a shepherd and you ought to smell like a shepherd. Now this, so far in my history, this is my tribe. This is my clan. These are my sheep that I shepherd. Some of you don't have them yet, but you will. Some of you have got a lot more than this. For some of you, it may not look exactly the same. It'll be nephews or nieces. It'll be children in our church that God has called you. God has used men in my life all the way up to this very moment to mentor and to shepherd me. That's still going on even at my age. Men need men. And young women need safe men in their lives who can shepherd them. Guys, rise up. Let's be the generation that can and will accept that. I'm going to ask you to stand and let's do this. I'm going to pray for my sheep, and I'm going to pray for other men who are willing to be shepherds. I'm going to kneel right here on these steps. And if you're a dad, we are, as it says in Proverbs, like iron that sharpens iron. We don't have to do this alone. We do it together. We are a band of brothers. We are a community of fathers. We are shepherds together. And we do this together.